There is a quiet moment in life when things don't fall apart all at once. They slip slowly, subtly, almost invisibly. A sentence spoken too quickly, a thought followed without question, a mood allowed to take the lead, a purchase made to escape a feeling. Nothing dramatic happens in that moment. And yet, your future quietly shifts. Most people don't lose control in big ways. They lose it in small, repeated moments they never pause to notice. This audiobook is about those moments. Not to judge them, not to fight them, but to understand them. Because control is not about being rigid. It is not about suppressing emotions or forcing discipline. Real control is calm. It is steady. It is intentional. It is the ability to pause when everything inside you wants to react, to breathe when your mind wants to rush, to choose direction when your mood wants comfort, to protect your future when impulse wants relief. Your mouth, your mind, your mood, and your money are not separate parts of your life. They are one system. Your words reveal your emotional state. Your thoughts shape your reactions. Your emotions influence your decisions. And your money reflects the patterns you live by. When one becomes unstable, the others follow. When one becomes disciplined, the others begin to align. This audiobook is a slow recalibration of that inner system. There is no pressure here, no demand to change everything at once, no expectation to be perfect, only awareness, only clarity, only the quiet rebuilding of inner structure. As you listen, you may notice something subtle. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts soften. Your nervous system settles. That is not accidental, because self-control does not begin with effort. It begins with presence. And presence is what allows intention to replace reaction. You don't need to fight yourself. You need to lead yourself. Gently, consistently, from the inside out. So let go of the day. Let your body rest. And allow these ideas to take root naturally. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming someone steady. Let's begin. There is a reason words are remembered long after emotions fade. A feeling passes. A moment cools. But a sentence, once released, stays. Most people underestimate the power of their own words because words feel light when they leave the mouth. They feel temporary, emotional, spontaneous. But the impact of words is rarely temporary. They settle into memory. They shape perception. They quietly redefine relationships. An uncontrolled mouth doesn't just create awkward moments. It creates permanent consequences. A single sentence spoken in frustration can undo years of trust. A careless remark can change how someone sees you forever. A defensive response can turn a simple conversation into a lasting fracture. And the most dangerous part is this: most of this damage is not dramatic. It's subtle. It doesn't explode. It erodes. People don't always confront you about the words that hurt them. They don't always argue. They don't always react. Sometimes they simply pull back. They share less. They trust less. They remember. This is why the first pillar of self-control begins with the mouth. Not because words are more important than actions, but because words precede actions. Your mouth is the fastest outlet of your inner state. It reveals your emotional regulation before your behavior does. It exposes your thinking before your intentions are clear. When the mouth is uncontrolled, it becomes an extension of impulse. And impulse does not protect your future. Most people believe they speak because they are honest. But honesty without discipline is not honesty. It is leakage. True honesty is intentional. It considers timing. It considers tone. It considers consequence. An uncontrolled mouth doesn't speak truth. It speaks reaction. And reaction is rarely aligned with who you want to be. Think back to moments you regret, not the big mistakes, the small ones, the comment you wish you could take back, the tone that changed everything, the message sent too quickly, the explanation given too defensively. In most cases, the regret didn't come from what you felt. It came from how quickly you expressed it. Emotion rises fast. Wisdom arrives slower. And if you don't create space between the two, emotion wins by default. This is why pausing is not a communication trick. It is a discipline. A pause is the moment where control enters the conversation. When you pause, you reclaim authority over your voice. You allow the emotional wave to pass without drowning in it. You give your mind time to catch up to your feelings. Most people never pause because silence feels uncomfortable. Silence feels like vulnerability. Silence feels like weakness. Silence feels like losing control. But the truth is the opposite. Silence is the moment control becomes visible. When you don't rush to respond, people feel it. They sense stability. They sense confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to defend itself. Strong people do not speak to release emotion. They speak to create outcomes. Weak words chase validation. Strong words protect direction. Weak words explain too much. Strong words say only what matters. You can often tell who has self-control by listening to how much they speak. Not because talking is bad, but because restraint reveals clarity. The most respected voices are rarely the loudest. They are the most deliberate. Their words land because they are not thrown carelessly. They are placed. This is the shift you must make. Stop seeing words as emotional expressions. Start seeing them as commitments. Every sentence commits you to a direction. Every tone commits you to a version of yourself. Every reaction commits you to a consequence. Once you see this, you stop speaking casually. Not because you are afraid, but because you are aware. Awareness changes everything. When someone criticizes you, awareness says, pause. When someone provokes you, awareness says, wait. When anger rises, awareness says, observe. This doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you choose when and how. There is a difference between strength and force. Force reacts. Strength responds. A controlled mouth doesn't avoid difficult conversations. It handles them cleanly. It doesn't escalate unnecessarily. It doesn't personalize everything. It doesn't bleed emotion into every exchange. It speaks from principle, not from pressure. And here is a truth many people don't want to accept. Most verbal damage cannot be undone. You can apologize. You can explain. You can promise to do better. But perception, once formed, rarely resets completely. This is not meant to create fear. It is meant to create respect for your own voice. Your voice is powerful. Treat it that way. Before a word leaves your mouth, ask yourself one quiet question. Will this protect my future or sabotage it? If it protects, speak clearly. If it sabotages, let it pass. If you're unsure, wait. Silence costs nothing. Regret is expensive. This is how you begin controlling your mouth. Not by becoming quiet, but by becoming precise. Precision creates authority. Authority creates trust. And trust is built sentence by sentence. When you control your words, you control the tone of your life. And once the mouth is disciplined, the mind becomes clearer. Because the moment you slow your speech, you give your thinking room to lead. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into this discipline, not just controlling what you say, but mastering the strength of choosing when not to speak. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. There is a form of strength that feels uncomfortable at first, not because it is difficult, but because it goes against instinct. It is the strength of choosing not to speak. Most people are trained to believe that silence means weakness, that if you don't respond immediately, you lose ground, that if you don't explain yourself, you appear uncertain. But silence is not absence. Silence is containment. It is power held inward instead of released outward. A controlled person understands this. They do not rush to fill every gap in conversation. They do not react to every comment. They do not feel obligated to defend every assumption. They know that not every moment requires a response. And because of this, they are difficult to provoke. Provocation feeds on reaction. Drama survives on engagement. Conflict grows through repetition. When you remove your response, the cycle breaks. Most arguments don't continue because the issue is deep. They continue because someone keeps feeding them. Silence starves conflict. This is why emotionally reactive people are easy to manipulate. Push the right button, and they explode. Say the right phrase, and they lose composure. But a person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. The strongest position in any interaction is the ability to remain still while others react. This does not mean ignoring problems. It means choosing when to engage. Silence gives you perspective. When you pause instead of responding, you step outside the emotional storm. You see motives more clearly. You notice tone shifts. You observe patterns. When someone attacks, silence reveals whether they seek resolution or control. When someone complains, silence shows whether they want solutions or attention. When someone disrespects you, silence exposes their insecurity. Speaking too quickly blinds you to these signals. Silence sharpens perception. There is also strategic power in silence. When your words are rare, they carry weight. When your voice is not constant, people listen. This is why in negotiation, the one who speaks first often loses leverage. In conflict, the one who reacts first often loses power. In relationships, The one who explains too much often reveals insecurity. Silence positions you, not above others, but grounded within yourself. Many people fear silence because they associate it with awkwardness. But awkwardness is temporary. Loss of dignity is not. Silence protects your dignity. It prevents you from saying things you will later wish you had withheld. It keeps you from escalating situations unnecessarily. It allows emotions to settle before decisions are made. The first thought that wants to escape your mouth is almost always the worst one. It is raw, unfiltered, defensive. If you release it, you hand control to the trigger. But when you hold your tongue for even a few seconds, a second thought appears, calmer, clearer, more aligned. That second thought is the one that protects your future. You are not required to attend every argument you are invited to. You are not obligated to correct every misunderstanding. You are not responsible for proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Silence is not avoidance. It is selection. You select where your energy goes. A controlled person does not conserve silence out of fear. They use silence out of wisdom. They understand that explanation is not always power. Presence is. There is also a deeper layer to silence. Silence trains emotional discipline. Each time you hold your tongue while emotion rises, you strengthen your ability to regulate yourself. You prove to your nervous system that you are safe. You show your mind that it does not need to react to survive. Over time, this creates internal stability. You stop feeling the urge to respond immediately. You stop feeling threatened by disagreement. You stop feeling hijacked by emotion. Silence becomes natural. And when silence becomes natural, your words become intentional by default. This is how influence grows. Not through volume, not through dominance, but through restraint. People trust those who do not need to speak to assert themselves. They feel safe around someone who is not emotionally volatile. This safety is felt, not explained, and it changes how people respond to you. You will notice fewer confrontations, fewer misunderstandings, fewer regrets. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Learning silence does not mean disappearing. It means appearing fully when it matters. It means speaking with clarity instead of noise, with purpose instead of impulse. In time, people will notice something about you. You don't rush. You don't react. You don't escalate. You choose. And that choice is powerful. In the next chapter, we will turn inward. Because controlling your mouth is only possible when your mind is trained to pause. And that is where real self-control begins. Every day, you face a quiet battle, not between right and wrong, but between now and later, between the impulse that demands immediate relief and the intention that protects your future. Most people believe their biggest enemy is lack of motivation. But motivation is not what ruins lives. Impulse does. Impulse speaks quickly. It feels urgent. It disguises itself as truth. And if you don't recognize it, it will run your life while convincing you that you chose freely. This is the impulse loop. A thought appears. An emotion follows. An action is taken. A consequence is created. And then the loop repeats. Most people live inside this loop without ever seeing it. They react to the first thought. They obey the first feeling. They move before clarity arrives. And later, they wonder why their life feels scattered. The first thought is rarely wise. It is emotional, conditioned, built from past experiences, fears, habits, and survival patterns. The first thought is not you. It is your programming. But when you identify with it, you surrender control. The impulse loop survives because it feels natural. Reacting feels honest. Acting quickly feels decisive. Following emotion feels authentic. But authenticity without awareness is not freedom. It is automation. A disciplined mind understands one essential truth. Thoughts are suggestions, not commands. You do not have to obey every idea that enters your mind. You do not have to follow every urge that appears. You do not have to act on every emotional signal. Once you see this, the loop begins to weaken. The most important skill in breaking the impulse loop is creating space. Control lives in the gap between stimulus and response, the gap between thought and action, the gap between feeling and decision. Without a gap, impulse wins. With a gap, intention enters. Most people never experience this gap because they fill it immediately with action. They speak, they buy, they react, they escape. But the moment you pause, you step outside the loop. Pausing does not mean suppressing emotion. It means observing it. Observation changes everything. When an impulse arises, instead of following it, you name it. This is anger. This is fear. This is insecurity. This is impatience. Naming creates distance. It separates you from the emotion and places you back in control. Once named, the impulse loses intensity, not because it disappears, but because it is no longer unconscious. Conscious impulses do not dominate. Unconscious ones do. After naming comes redirection. You choose where your attention goes next. Your breath, your values, your long-term goal, your next grounded action. Redirection is not avoidance. It is leadership. You are telling your mind, this is not the direction we're going. Over time, this process rewires your internal patterns. Pause, observe, name, redirect, act. This sequence builds mental strength. At first, impulses feel overwhelming. They feel automatic. They feel impossible to resist. That is normal. Your mind has been trained for years to react before thinking. You are not broken. You are simply untrained. Training takes repetition. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken the old loop. Every time you choose intention over impulse, you strengthen a new one. And slowly, your internal environment changes. The mind becomes quieter. The impulses become less urgent. The space between thought and action grows. This is not willpower. This is structure. A disciplined mind is not one that never feels impulses. It is one that does not obey them automatically. You begin to notice something important. Many of your loudest thoughts are not your best thoughts. Many of your quietest thoughts are the wisest. But wisdom speaks softly. And if your mind is noisy, you will miss it. Breaking the impulse loop allows clarity to rise. You stop making decisions in panic. You stop sending messages you regret. You stop reacting to every emotional spike. You become difficult to rush. And this changes how people experience you. They feel your steadiness. They trust your decisions. They sense your self-command. This is the beginning of mental authority. In the next chapter, we will deepen this work, not just resisting impulses, but reprogramming the mental patterns that create them in the first place. Because true control is not fighting the mind, it is training it. And once the mind is trained, everything else begins to align. The mind was never meant to lead your life on its own. It was meant to serve. But for most people, the mind has quietly taken control, not because it is wise, but because it is fast. Thoughts appear instantly. Judgments form automatically. Conclusions arrive before evidence. And if you don't interrupt this process, the mind decides for you. This is why learning to pause is not a technique. It is a re-education of your inner system. A pause is the moment you reclaim leadership. Without a pause, the mind reacts. With a pause, the mind listens. Most people assume thinking is something that happens to them. But thinking is a process that can be trained. Untrained thinking is reactive. Trained thinking is deliberate. And the difference between the two determines the quality of your life. When the mind is untrained, it rushes towards certainty. It fills silence with assumptions. It replaces clarity with stories. You receive a message and instantly imagine worst-case scenarios. You hear criticism and immediately feel attacked. You face uncertainty and your mind rushes to fear. This happens because the mind prefers familiarity over truth. It chooses old patterns because they feel safe. Pausing interrupts that habit. A pause tells the mind, we are not reacting yet. And this moment changes everything. At first, pausing feels uncomfortable. Your body wants action. Your emotions want release. Your thoughts want resolution. But clarity requires tolerance for discomfort. If you cannot sit with uncertainty for a few seconds, you will always choose the fastest answer, not the wisest one. Training the mind to pause begins with awareness of speed. Notice how quickly your thoughts move, how fast conclusions form, how urgently the mind wants to do something. Speed is not intelligence. Speed is conditioning. A trained mind values accuracy over urgency. The pause creates a space where intelligence can emerge. In that space, you ask better questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me, you ask, what is actually happening? Instead of, what does this mean about me, you ask, what part of this is within my control? Instead of, what should I do right now, you ask, what response protects my future? These questions cannot be answered in a rush. They require stillness. Stillness is not emptiness. It is focus without pressure. The pause also retrains your nervous system. When the mind reacts quickly, the body enters survival mode. Heart rate increases. Breathing shortens. Thinking narrows. This state is designed for danger, not decision-making. Pausing allows the body to exit survival and re-enter regulation. Even a few slow breaths can signal safety. And when the body feels safe, the mind becomes clear. This is why calm thinking is not a personality trait. It is a physiological state. You cannot think clearly while your system believes it is under threat. Pausing tells the system there is no immediate danger, and intelligence returns. Training the pause also requires letting go of the need to be right. Most mental reactions are driven by ego protection, defending an identity, protecting an image, avoiding discomfort. But ego reacts faster than wisdom. When you pause, you delay ego long enough for perspective to arrive. Perspective does not need to win. It only needs space. Another benefit of pausing is emotional separation. You begin to see thoughts as events, not commands. A thought appears. You notice it. You do not obey it immediately. This breaks identification. You are no longer inside the thought. You are observing it. Observation weakens control. The mind loses authority when it is seen clearly. This is why awareness is power. The more aware you become of your thinking, the less control it has over you. Pausing also improves judgment. You stop making decisions based on intensity. You stop confusing urgency with importance. You stop reacting to noise. Instead, you respond to relevance. This changes everything from communication to finances to relationships. You speak less, but with more impact. You decide slower, but with better outcomes. You feel more, but act more wisely. A trained mind does not suppress thoughts. It filters them. It recognizes which thoughts deserve attention and which ones should pass without engagement. Not every thought deserves action. Not every fear deserves belief. Not every urge deserves obedience. Pausing is how you choose. At first, you will forget to pause. That is part of training. You will react and notice afterward. You will catch yourself mid-reaction. You will pause late. This still counts. Awareness after the fact is the beginning of awareness before action. Each moment of noticing strengthens the next pause. Over time, the pause becomes automatic. You no longer need to force it. It appears naturally, and when it does, your entire inner world shifts. You feel less rushed, less pressured, less reactive. You begin to experience calm, not as absence of thought, but as command over thought. This is mental authority. The ability to remain steady when uncertainty appears. The ability to think clearly when others panic. The ability to choose direction when emotions fluctuate. A mind trained to pause becomes a foundation. It supports emotional discipline. It protects communication. It stabilizes financial decisions. Without pause, discipline collapses under pressure. With pause, discipline becomes natural. This is why training the mind is not about thinking more. It is about thinking later. Later than impulse. Later than emotion. Later than fear. When you delay reaction, you invite intelligence, and intelligence always arrives quietly. In the next chapter, we will move deeper from the mind into the emotional system, because once thinking slows down, you begin to notice how emotions influence everything you do. And learning to feel without losing direction is the next step in true self-control. Most people misunderstand emotional control. They believe it means becoming cold, detached, unfeeling. But emotional discipline is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without being ruled by it. You were never meant to shut emotions down. You were meant to guide them. Emotions are signals. They carry information about your internal state, your needs, your values. But signals are not instructions. When emotions become instructions, direction is lost. This is where most instability begins. A moment of frustration turns into a sharp comment. A moment of insecurity turns into avoidance. A moment of sadness turns into withdrawal. A moment of excitement turns into impulsive commitment. In each case, the emotion wasn't wrong. The obedience was. Emotional discipline begins when you separate feeling from action. You allow the feeling to exist. You deny it the authority to decide. This requires awareness. Most emotional reactions happen so quickly that people never see them coming. A tone changes. A thought stings. A memory triggers. And behavior follows. To build discipline, you must slow this chain down, not to analyze it endlessly, but to notice it clearly. When an emotion rises, the first task is recognition, not judgment, not resistance. Recognition. This is anger. This is fear. This is disappointment. This is excitement. Naming an emotion creates distance. Distance restores choice. You are no longer inside the emotion. You are observing it. This simple shift changes everything. Once observed, the emotion loses intensity. Not immediately, but enough for clarity to return. The body may still feel tight. The chest may still feel heavy. The energy may still be present. But the mind is no longer hijacked. At this stage, regulation becomes possible. Regulation does not mean control through force. It means allowing the nervous system to settle. Emotion is physiological before it is psychological. Heart rate increases. Breathing shortens. Muscles tense. If you try to think your way out of emotion, you will fail. You must calm the body first. Slow breathing, relaxed posture, stillness. These are not techniques. They are signals of safety. When the body feels safe, the mind regains authority. This is why emotional discipline is learned through the body, not through ideas. Another key element is tolerance. Most emotional mistakes happen because people cannot tolerate discomfort. They want the feeling to end immediately. So they speak, they react, they escape, they distract. But emotional maturity is the ability to stay present with discomfort without acting destructively. You do not need to like the feeling. You only need to withstand it. Emotions rise. They peak. They fall. If you don't feed them with stories and reactions, they pass. This teaches your nervous system a new lesson. I can feel this and survive. And that lesson builds resilience. Emotional discipline also requires honesty, not with others first, but with yourself. Many people hide emotions from themselves. They label anger as logic. They call fear realism. They disguise insecurity as indifference. This self-deception prevents regulation. You cannot manage what you refuse to acknowledge. Honesty allows clarity. I am angry because I feel disrespected. I am anxious because I feel uncertain. I am sad because I feel disconnected. These statements are not weaknesses. They are accurate data. And accurate data leads to intelligent response. Emotional discipline also means understanding patterns. Certain situations trigger certain reactions. Certain people activate certain emotions. This is not random. Your emotional system is patterned. When you observe patterns, you gain predictability. And predictability is control. You stop being surprised by yourself. You stop reacting blindly. You begin to anticipate emotional spikes and prepare for them. Preparation is the quiet form of discipline. Another important aspect is emotional responsibility. Emotionally disciplined people do not outsource regulation. They do not expect others to calm them. They do not demand the world be gentle. They take responsibility for their internal state. This does not make them detached. It makes them reliable. People feel safe around those who are emotionally self-contained. Safety creates trust. Trust deepens connection. Emotional discipline also protects consistency. Mood-driven behavior is unstable. One day you are motivated. The next day you are withdrawn. Emotionally disciplined behavior is steady. You show up even when you don't feel like it. You communicate respectfully even when irritated. You honor commitments even when tired. This consistency builds identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who does not abandon direction under pressure. That identity becomes self-reinforcing. The more you act from discipline, the less power emotions have over your actions. And here is a quiet truth. You will still feel deeply. Emotional discipline does not flatten you. It grounds you. You feel anger without becoming aggressive. You feel sadness without collapsing. You feel excitement without losing judgment. This balance is rare. And because it is rare, it is powerful. People trust those who remain steady. They rely on those who can feel without exploding. They respect those who do not let emotions leak into every decision. This respect is not demanded. It is felt. In the next chapter, we will go even deeper. From emotional discipline to emotional direction. Because learning to regulate feelings is only the beginning. Learning to live by identity rather than mood is what creates long-term stability. And that is where true self-control takes shape. Most people don't lose their future in one dramatic moment. They lose it slowly, quietly, one mood at a time. They don't fail because they lack intelligence. They don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they allow something unstable to lead something permanent. Mood. Mood is temporary. Identity is enduring. But most people reverse the roles. They let mood decide when they work. They let mood decide how they speak. They let mood decide whether they stay consistent or disappear. They let mood decide whether they move forward or retreat. And slowly, direction is replaced by reaction. Here is the truth that changes everything. Mood is weather. Identity is direction. Weather changes. Direction does not. Rain does not mean you abandon the journey. Wind does not mean you forget the destination. Dark clouds do not mean the map is wrong. Yet, emotionally, this is exactly how most people live. A bad mood arrives. And suddenly, I'll start tomorrow. I'm not feeling it today. This isn't the right time. Maybe this isn't for me. Mood lies convincingly. It speaks with urgency. It speaks with emotion. It feels real. But mood is not truth. Mood is sensation. It is information, not instruction. Identity, on the other hand, does not negotiate with feelings. Identity leads. Identity says, "This is who I am, regardless of how I feel. This is what I do, even when it's uncomfortable. This is the standard I live by." This is the difference between people who build momentum and people who reset their lives every few months. Mood-driven people live in cycles. Identity-driven people live in trajectories. Mood-driven people need motivation. Identity-driven people rely on alignment. Mood-driven people are powerful on good days. Identity-driven people are consistent on all days. This does not mean ignoring emotions. It means not surrendering authority to them. Emotional maturity is not emotional numbness. It is emotional leadership. You feel tired, but you still show up. You feel anxious, but you still act clearly. You feel discouraged, but you still keep your commitments. This is not force. This is integrity. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline means pushing harder. In reality, discipline means deciding once and obeying often. Identity removes daily debate. When identity is clear, behavior becomes simple. You no longer ask, "Do I feel like it?" You ask, "Is this who I am?" And the answer decides the action. Mood says, "Seek comfort." Identity says, "Protect direction." Mood says, "Avoid discomfort." Identity says, "Discomfort is temporary. Alignment is permanent." A mood-led life feels honest in the moment, but unstable over time. An identity-led life feels difficult in the moment, but powerful over time. This is where most people break. They mistake emotional resistance as a sign to stop, instead of a signal to stabilize. Resistance does not mean wrong path. Resistance means growth pressure. Weather does not cancel direction. To shift from mood-led to identity-led living, one simple practice changes everything. Name the mood, then act from identity. This is frustration. This is fear. This is exhaustion. Naming creates distance. You stop being inside the emotion. You become the observer of it. And once you observe, you regain choice. You don't fight the mood. You don't dramatize it. You don't obey it. You act anyway, calmly, minimally, intentionally. A small action is enough. 10 minutes of work. One honest sentence instead of a reaction. One disciplined decision instead of avoidance. Each time you act from identity while the mood argues, something important happens. Your nervous system learns a new rule. I am safe even when I don't follow feelings. That rewires your internal hierarchy. Mood moves down. Identity moves up. Over time, moods lose power not because they disappear, but because they are no longer obeyed. This creates stability, and stability creates trust. You trust yourself. Others trust you. Life begins to respond differently, because nothing is more grounding than a person who does not collapse when emotions shift. A person whose behavior is predictable, even when feelings are not. That is leadership. Leadership of self. And once identity leads your actions, the next area begins to reorganize naturally: your money. Because money does not respond to emotion. It responds to patterns. And in the next chapter, we will explore how money acts as a mirror reflecting your emotional discipline, your identity, and your inner structure. When mood stops leading, money can finally follow purpose. Money is not just a financial tool. It is one of the most honest mirrors you will ever face. It does not care about your intentions. It does not care about your excuses. It does not care about what you meant to do. Money reflects what you actually do. That is why two people can earn the same income and live completely different lives. One feels constantly stressed, behind, and trapped. The other feels calm, stable, and in control. The difference is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not even income. It is emotional discipline expressed through money. Most people believe they have a money problem. In reality, they have an emotional pattern that shows up through money. They spend when they are tired. They spend when they are bored. They spend when they are stressed. They spend when they feel insecure. They spend when they feel behind compared to others. Money becomes a coping mechanism. And coping always feels justified in the moment. I deserve this. I'll fix it later. It's not that much. I'll earn it back. These thoughts feel harmless, but repeated over time, they quietly erode freedom. This is why money is such a powerful mirror. It exposes patterns you can hide everywhere else. You can lie to people. You can lie to yourself. But your bank account tells the truth. Not about how much you earn, but about how you regulate yourself. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Spending is rarely logical. It is emotional. If money decisions were purely rational, most people would be financially stable. But emotion interferes. Stress demands relief. Insecurity demands validation. Boredom demands stimulation. Fear demands distraction. And money becomes the fastest escape. This is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system habit. When emotions rise and identity is weak, money becomes the release valve. That is why financial discipline cannot exist without emotional discipline, and why money improves naturally when inner control improves. The moment you stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "What emotion is trying to buy relief right now?" you regain power. Because once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Money does not disappear suddenly. It leaks emotion by emotion. Small purchases, small justifications, small moments of impulse. And then one day, the total feels overwhelming. But the damage was never about the amount. It was about repetition without awareness. This is where most people make a mistake. They try to fix money with rules, budgets, restrictions, punishment. But rules collapse under emotional pressure. Structure survives. Identity survives. Financial maturity is not about restriction. It is about removing emotion from decision-making. And that begins with one shared skill you've already practiced: the pause. The same pause that protects your words. The same pause that stabilizes your mood. That pause also protects your money. Before spending, pause. Not to shame yourself. Not to overthink. just long enough to ask 3 grounding questions. Is this solving a real need or a temporary feeling? Will this still matter tomorrow? Is this aligned with who I am becoming? Most impulses collapse under inspection. They rely on speed. They rely on urgency. They rely on emotions staying unchallenged. When you slow down, clarity returns, and clarity is the enemy of impulse. Another truth that changes everything: money obeys identity, not motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Identity stays. If you see yourself as someone who is bad with money, your actions will quietly prove it. If you see yourself as someone who can't save, your habits will reinforce that belief. Money follows the story you live by. This is why separating identity from income is critical. You are not your salary. You are not your lifestyle. You are not what you can buy. When people attach identity to spending, money becomes unstable. They buy to feel equal. They buy to feel impressive. They buy to feel secure. But security built on spending is fragile. Real security comes from control. Control over reactions. Control over habits. Control over delayed gratification. Every time you save instead of spend, you are not just moving money. You are reinforcing identity. I am someone who protects my future. I am someone who doesn't panic spend. I am someone who acts from intention. This is how wealth begins quietly. Not through dramatic financial moves, but through boring, repeated, disciplined choices, which is why most people never build it. Because boredom exposes emotional weakness. People want excitement. They want quick wins. They want emotional highs. But wealth is built in moments that feel unimportant. Choosing not to buy. Tracking instead of avoiding. Planning instead of reacting. Money rewards patience more than intelligence. And patience is emotional mastery in disguise. This is also why avoiding money is so dangerous. Avoidance feels protective, but it weakens control. Not checking balances, not opening statements, not tracking spending. Avoidance gives emotion-free control. Clarity, even when uncomfortable, restores authority. Looking at your numbers does not make you poor. Ignoring them does. When you see clearly, you can direct clearly. Structure comes next. Not complicated systems. Simple ones. Money for stability. Money for growth. Money for freedom. When money has a job, it stops wandering. Structure removes daily debate. Debate is where emotion wins. And once structure exists, discipline becomes easier, because you are no longer deciding from scratch every time. You are following a system that reflects your identity. Money is not a moral issue. It is a behavioral one. It does not judge you. It mirrors you. And when you improve the mirror, your thinking, your emotional regulation, your identity, money improves naturally. In the next chapter, we will go even deeper. Because wealth is not built in moments of excitement. It is built in repetition, in boredom, in consistency long after motivation fades. Quiet wealth is built where most people quit paying attention. Most people imagine wealth as something dramatic, a breakthrough, a lucky decision, a sudden increase in income. a moment where everything changes at once. That fantasy is comforting because it allows people to wait. But real wealth does not arrive loudly. It arrives quietly. So quietly that most people miss it completely. Wealth is not built in moments of excitement. It is built in moments of boredom. And boredom is where discipline is tested. Motivation feels powerful, but it is unreliable. It spikes, then fades. It inspires action, then disappears. Repetition, on the other hand, is boring. It does not care how you feel. It works whether you are inspired or tired. This is why repetition wins every time. Most people fail financially not because they lack desire, but because they depend on motivation to sustain habits that require identity. They save when they feel inspired. They track spending when they feel responsible. They plan when they feel pressured. And when the feeling fades, so does the habit. Wealth does not respond to feelings. It responds to consistency. Quiet wealth is built by people who keep doing the right thing long after the emotional reward disappears. That is why it feels boring. Boring means no dopamine, no instant feedback, no emotional high, just steady movement in the right direction. And most people cannot tolerate that. They need stimulation. They need excitement. They need proof now. So they abandon what works for what feels good. Repetition asks something different of you. It asks for patience without applause, effort without recognition, discipline without urgency. This is where identity matters. If you see repetition as punishment, you will resist it. If you see repetition as who you are, you will embody it. Wealth habits are not about force. They are about removing friction. The simplest wealth habits are also the most powerful. Tracking regularly, saving automatically, reviewing weekly, planning monthly. None of these feel impressive. None of these feel exciting. And yet, over time, they outperform almost everything else. Because repetition compounds invisibly, you don't notice it day to day. But one day, stability appears. Then options appear. Then calm appears. Not suddenly, but undeniably. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people would rather feel rich than be rich. They want the appearance, the lifestyle, the validation. But those things drain wealth faster than almost anything else. Quiet wealth avoids attention. It grows behind the scenes. It values margin. It values breathing room. It is not rushed. It is not reactive. And it is built by people who are comfortable being underestimated. Repetition creates trust. You trust yourself because you follow through. Money begins to trust your structure. Life begins to respond differently. Because consistency is rare. Most people are intense for a short time and inconsistent for a long time. Wealth belongs to those who invert that pattern. Low intensity, high consistency. Small actions done repeatedly beat big actions done occasionally. Saving a little regularly beats saving a lot sporadically. Tracking calmly beats panicking later. Planning when things are fine beats reacting when things are broken. Repetition is not exciting, but it is stabilizing. And stability is the foundation of freedom. Another truth few people accept. You do not rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. If your system depends on motivation, it will collapse under boredom. If your system depends on identity, it will survive emotion. That is why automated habits matter. Automation removes mood from the equation. Saving happens without decision. Bills are handled without stress. Tracking becomes routine, not drama. When decisions disappear, discipline strengthens. You are no longer negotiating with yourself every day. And negotiation is where most people lose. Quiet wealth also requires emotional tolerance. You must tolerate delayed gratification, not keeping up with others, choosing long-term safety over short-term pleasure. These moments feel small, but they shape identity. Each time you tolerate boredom instead of impulse, you train patience. Each time you repeat a habit without excitement, you reinforce discipline. Each time you choose structure over stimulation, you build resilience. And resilience is wealth's closest ally. This is why wealth is quiet. Loud people need validation. Quiet people need alignment. Wealth does not care about attention. It grows where focus lives. If you constantly check progress emotionally, you weaken patience. If you trust the process and repeat the habits, progress takes care of itself. Repetition also protects you from yourself. It prevents emotional spikes from derailing progress. It prevents moods from hijacking decisions. It prevents boredom from becoming self-sabotage. You do not need to feel good to act well. You need to act well to feel safe. Over time, something subtle shifts. You stop needing motivation. You stop feeling anxious. You stop reacting to money emotionally. Not because money increased dramatically, but because control increased quietly. And control is freedom. In the next chapter, we will connect everything together. Because when your mouth, mind, mood, and money align, life stops feeling fragile. Alignment creates stability. Stability creates calm. Calm creates power. Quiet wealth is not a destination. It is the natural result of alignment repeated long enough. Most people experience life as a constant state of correction. They say something and regret it. They think something and feel overwhelmed. They feel something and act against their own interests. They spend something and feel anxious afterward. And they assume these are separate problems. They are not. They are symptoms of one core issue: misalignment. When your mouth, mind, mood, and money are not moving in the same direction, life feels unstable no matter how hard you try. You may work on one area intensely, but if the others remain reactive, progress collapses under pressure. Alignment is what removes friction from your life. Alignment means every internal system supports the same future instead of pulling against it. Let's break the flow down clearly, because this sequence explains almost every form of self-sabotage. It always begins with the mouth. Your words are not just communication tools. They are emotional triggers. The way you speak shapes the emotional atmosphere around you and within you. When your speech is rushed, defensive, negative, or impulsive, your nervous system stays activated. That activation raises stress levels, narrows thinking, and destabilizes emotions. A careless sentence does not stay isolated. It creates tension. Tension fuels emotional reactivity. Reactivity leaks into decisions. This is why arguments are often followed by bad choices. Why stress conversations lead to impulsive spending. Why negative self-talk reinforces scarcity. Your mouth sets the tone. When speech is undisciplined, the mind cannot stay clear. This brings us to the second link, the mind. A mind under constant emotional stimulation cannot think strategically. It jumps to conclusions. It exaggerates threats. It turns temporary discomfort into permanent fear. Most people believe their thoughts are accurate reflections of reality. In truth, many thoughts are emotional interpretations masquerading as facts. When your mouth feeds the mind, chaos, complaints, self-criticism, emotional language, the mind responds with noise. Noise creates emotional instability. Emotional instability destroys consistency. A clear mind does not require perfect circumstances. It requires reduced interference. When speech becomes intentional, the mind gains space. When the mind gains space, it begins to regulate emotion instead of amplifying it. This is where mood enters the system. Mood is the most volatile component of human behavior. It changes with sleep, with stress, with hormones, with external feedback, with weather, with minor inconveniences. And yet, most people allow mood to lead permanent decisions. This is one of the most damaging reversals in modern life. Mood is weather. Identity is direction. When mood leads, behavior becomes inconsistent. When identity leads, mood becomes information, not instruction. A misaligned system looks like this. You feel stressed. You speak sharply. You speak sharply, you think negatively. You think negatively, emotions spike. Emotions spike, discipline collapses. Discipline collapses, money reacts emotionally. One bad day becomes a chain reaction. Not because the person is weak, but because no internal structure interrupts the sequence. Alignment interrupts the sequence early. When your speech is calm, your thinking slows. When thinking slows, emotions stabilize. When emotions stabilize, decisions become intentional. When decisions are intentional, money follows structure. Money is the final mirror in the system. It reflects the accumulated state of the others. Money problems are rarely about math. They are about regulation. Emotional spending is not a financial issue. It is a mood regulation issue. Avoiding financial clarity is not a money issue. It is a mental avoidance issue. Overspending to impress is not a budget issue. It is an identity insecurity issue. Money simply reveals what is happening upstream. That is why fixing money without fixing alignment never lasts. People create budgets but still panic spend. They earn more but still feel unstable. They save briefly, then relapse, because the internal drivers remain unchanged. Alignment changes the drivers. Alignment means your mouth speaks from intention, not impulse. Your mind directs thoughts instead of following them. Your mood is felt, not obeyed. Your money follows principles, not emotions. This creates something rare: stability. Stability is not rigidity. It is reliability. You know how you will respond even under pressure. You do not break commitments because of feelings. You do not escalate conflicts emotionally. You do not sabotage long-term goals for short-term relief. This internal predictability rebuilds self-trust, and self-trust changes everything. When you trust yourself, you stop overcompensating. You stop reacting. You stop chasing validation. You stop spending to soothe emotion. Life becomes quieter, not empty quiet. Quiet enough to think clearly. Quiet enough to plan. Quiet enough to build. Alignment also reduces fatigue. Much of modern exhaustion is not physical. It is internal conflict. Wanting one thing but doing another. Knowing better but acting emotionally. Promising yourself change and breaking it repeatedly. Alignment removes that friction. Energy stops leaking through contradiction. You are no longer fighting yourself. And when internal conflict disappears, progress accelerates naturally. This is why alignment creates momentum. Each area reinforces the others. Disciplined speech reinforces calm thinking. Calm thinking reinforces emotional regulation. Emotional regulation reinforces financial consistency. Financial consistency reinforces identity. The system begins to loop upward instead of downward. Self-control becomes self-mastery. Not because you are forcing behavior, but because behavior now reflects who you are. This is the moment where control stops feeling like restriction. It feels like relief. You no longer fear your reactions. You no longer fear your moods. You no longer fear your finances, because they are no longer running independently. They are aligned under one authority, identity. In the final chapter, we will anchor this identity fully, because alignment is not something you practice occasionally. It is something you cement permanently. And once identity is established, discipline no longer requires effort. It becomes instinct. Alignment creates stability. Stability creates freedom. And freedom is the reward of self-leadership. Everything you have learned so far leads to one final truth. Self-control is not something you do. It is something you become. Most people try to change their lives by changing behavior. They try to speak differently, think positively, manage emotions, budget better. And for a short time, it works, until pressure arrives. Then the old patterns return, because behavior without identity collapses under stress. Identity is the root. Behavior is the branch. Results are the fruit. If the root is weak, the fruit will never last. This chapter is not about adding more techniques. It is about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs them. The person who leads themselves. The person who does not collapse when emotions rise. The person who pauses before speaking, even when triggered. The person who directs their thoughts, even when fear is loud. The person who honors commitments, even when mood argues otherwise. The person who makes financial decisions from principle, not pressure. This person is not born. They are built. Built through repetition. Built through standards. Built through integrity. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, your identity shifts. Every time you hold your tongue, you reinforce control. Every time you act despite emotion, you strengthen authority. Every time you protect your future, you earn self-trust. Identity is formed by evidence. Your mind is always watching what you do. It asks one question constantly: who am I becoming? Each choice answers that question. Most people train an identity they don't want by reacting, avoiding, quitting, and justifying. But you can train a different one. The identity of self-leadership. Self-led people do not feel less. They manage more. They feel anger but don't weaponize it. They feel fear but don't surrender to it. They feel discomfort but don't escape from it. They feel temptation but don't obey it. They understand something most people never learn. Feelings are real. They are not rulers. Impulse speaks loudly. Identity speaks steadily. Impulse wants relief now. Identity protects the future. Impulse asks, what feels good? Identity asks, what aligns with who I am? This shift removes internal chaos. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop debating every decision. You stop living in cycles of motivation and collapse. You act from standards. Standards simplify life. You no longer ask, do I feel like it today? You ask, this is what I do. And the action follows. Self-led people are consistent, not because they are superhuman, but because they reduce decision fatigue. They decide once, and then they obey their decision. This applies to everything. How they speak, how they think, how they regulate emotion, how they handle money. They do not wait to feel calm, to act calmly. They do not wait to feel confident, to behave confidently. They do not wait to feel motivated, to stay disciplined. They move first. Feelings follow. This is the hidden order of transformation. Behavior shapes emotion more reliably than emotion shapes behavior. This is why identity-based change lasts. Once you see yourself as someone who leads themselves, old patterns feel foreign. Reacting feels uncomfortable. Impulsive spending feels wrong. Breaking promises feels misaligned. Not because someone told you not to, but because it no longer matches who you are. This is freedom. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is not being controlled by whatever you feel. Freedom is stability. The ability to stay steady in chaos. The ability to remain clear under pressure. The ability to move forward even when emotions resist. Most people are controlled by impulse. A rare few are controlled by purpose. Those few shape their lives deliberately. They are trusted. They are reliable. They are calm. Not because life is easy, but because they are internally aligned. Your mouth becomes precise. Your mind becomes directed. Your mood becomes regulated. Your money becomes structured. And when these align, life stops feeling fragile. You become someone difficult to shake, not emotionally cold, not rigid, but grounded. Self-led people do not avoid discomfort. They navigate it. They do not chase validation. They build integrity. They do not need praise. Alignment is enough. This is why self-mastery is rare. It requires responsibility without applause, discipline without excitement, consistency without mood support. But the reward is unmatched. Calm, clarity, freedom, trust in yourself. You no longer fear your reactions. You no longer fear your moods. You no longer fear your finances. Because you are no longer led by them. You lead them. Transformation does not happen in one moment. It happens in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. Those choices are shaping you right now. So choose deliberately. Choose to pause. Choose to think clearly. Choose to regulate emotion. Choose to act from identity. Choose to be the person who leads themselves. Because a life built on self-control is a life built on freedom. And that freedom is yours to claim one aligned decision at a time. You've just walked through something deeper than advice. This was not about motivation. It was about structure. Structure in how you speak. Structure in how you think. Structure in how you feel. Structure in how you handle money. Because when structure exists inside, life stops feeling chaotic outside. You've seen that self-control is not punishment. It is preparation. Preparation for moments that test you. Preparation for emotions that rise unexpectedly. Preparation for decisions that shape your future quietly. You don't need to become rigid. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to become steady. Steady in your words. Steady in your thinking. Steady in your emotions. Steady in your finances. This steadiness is not loud. It does not demand attention, but it changes everything. As you move forward, don't try to apply everything at once. That's not how real change works. Instead, notice the pauses. Notice the moments when you could react but don't. Notice the thoughts you observe instead of obey. Notice the emotions you feel without letting them drive. Notice the small financial choices that protect your future. Those moments are where mastery is built. This audiobook was not meant to end with inspiration. It was meant to begin with awareness. Awareness that gives you choice. Choice that gives you control. Control that gives you freedom. If this message resonated with you, stay here. Subscribe to Sleep Success Audiobook for calm, deep, long-form audiobooks designed to reshape mindset, discipline, and inner stability while you rest. Listen again. Let the ideas settle. Let them work quietly in the background of your life. And if you're ready to commit to becoming the person who leads themselves, leave a comment below. I choose alignment. Your future is built in silence, built in consistency, built in self-respect. Thank you for listening. Rest well.